Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa says the recent spike in killings across the country may be tied to early political maneuvering ahead of the 2027 general elections. Speaking on politics, the general suggested that some politicians are deliberately fueling violence to discredit the government's security record and gain a political advantage. The country has seen a renewed wave of terror attacks in the northeast and bandit-related violence in the northwest, while Benue and Plateau states remain flashpoints. The defense chief also revealed that terrorism in Nigeria continues to thrive due to both local and foreign lending and funding. He said agencies including the Attorney General's Office, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, the DSS, and the National Intelligence Agency are tracking terror financiers, though legal challenges have delayed publicly naming those involved. Now, Salaudeen Hashimu, a security expert, joins me to share more on this. Thank you so much, Salaudeen, for joining us on the news. Thank you so much. Now, Nigeria CDS said the coming 2027 elections is fueling the rise in killings. I would like you to shed more light on that. I'd like to get more thoughts as regards the possibility of that assertion.
Yeah, I mean, political science has told us very clearly that there is a deeply intertwined connection between conflict and politics. And then, of course, if you contextualize and you find the kind of rhythm that we see playing out in different aspects of this country, it tells very clearly that there is a lot of nexus, and that is also as a result of years of bad governance, misrule, and how even the political elite have weaponized poverty and socioeconomic indicators as a way of dealing with citizens. So if you now come home very closely, you will realize that even the government itself recognizes this fact, and in the national security strategy, they try to take care of this political economy in the response to the fight against all of these menaces that are growing on a daily basis. Unfortunately, the national security strategy, as beautiful as that document looks, implementation has been a far cry, which again suggests that not implementing that document is another political weapon in the hands of the elite to continue to create this sort of political economy around counterinsurgency operations. The idea is simply put is that the template currently deployed by the armed forces, despite all the effort they have put on, cannot survive only with a kinetic method. We must find a non-kinetic response to be able to deal with this issue, which is clearly what the NSS had said, and this is exactly what the CDS is actually mentioning, that there is a need for the whole of society approach. It means that we must find some kind of peace-building method and all of those non-kinetic response plan that the government must actually deploy for the purpose of ensuring stability in their country. So even if you have all of that, election might not be the whole essence of breaking down law and order.
Okay.
People will ignore it, and that is because they have developed resistance and resilience against.
Okay, so I'm actually glad that you mentioned the possible role of the political class. Now, the CDS said that some politicians are deliberately fueling violence in the country. Now, if this is not actually misinformation, is it hard to actually draw up a list of these so-called politicians, round them up and have them tried?
You recall that the idea of this terrorism financing and financiers had been on the table since the previous administration. Lai Mohammed has consistently threatened he was going to lay out that list, but unfortunately that didn't happen until that administration left. So it tells very clearly that there is a whole lot of organized crime that happens within the executive and the entire government approach in dealing with this whole situation. And my point is simple. Sometimes for government to also deploy its state capacity, because the state has both coercive, has administrative, and also has all of the powers that it could use to be able to fast track the legal proceeding and processes for them to put this list out there. But unfortunately, everybody had only mentioned that there were names and there were lists, and those lists had never made it to the public. So that tells very clearly that there are quite a whole lot of names on that list that when it gets into the public, it is actually going to create additional uproar, or that some people might be further compromised. So this is in itself tells very clearly that Nigerians should not see what is happening as a tool for division. It is simply a weapon, a tier that has been created. And of course, creating a class suicide is one thing that we have seen playing out. Right. So it's actually a case of the state against the citizens, and itself must be dealt with very decisively.
Okay, so New Central held a town hall meeting over these attacks yesterday, and the families and victims said it is strategic, and some security personnel are complicit in dealing with terrorism, according to their claims. So with this new but not so new information coming from the military top brass, and the fact that dealing with insurgency is being politicized, is this war not a lost cause?
There's an industrial scale around this conflict, and it is very important to first mention that. And you know too well that when economy is woven around a particular subject, it becomes very difficult for you to stop it. Rather, it is for you to find some level of approach to tactically de-escalate it. And those de-escalation also come with some standard operating procedures. And I think that is one of the things that we need to deal with. There have been also gotten involved. These are not new, but particularly for those who are in the counterterrorism theories and conversations in the past decade or two. But what we have seen very largely is that there has been a growing political commitment from the side of the senior officers to consistently either find a way to deal with this issue without necessarily drawing public attention. And I think for me, while it is strategic to do that way, because again, you have to protect the military and the armed forces, and you have to protect the badge, and you have to protect the fatigue. But again, it is very important for them to also find a way that ensures that citizens also get a feedback. So what is that mechanism that needs to be devised for them to realize that, look, despite the fact that a number of these people have been processed, the court-martial and ordinary trial had taken them through this process, but they have been handed over to law enforcement, and citizens can have, even if not full details, but they can be fed back through a particular mechanism. And that itself, the CDS had started with all of this media interaction very lately, even engaging with the social media people. And I think this is a very good way to start. But I think the information he's passing across is not sufficient enough, which I think is what he needs to work around.
Okay, so having said that, the CDS also mentioned that, you know, the Attorney General of the Federation, the NFRU, DSS, and other security agencies are tracking terror financiers. But then, now talking about the lack or the ability to deal with insurgency, we're also looking at legal hurdles. And I'm wondering, seriously, when we should be focusing on decimating insurgency in the country, we're still having judicial bottlenecks. What is the way out?
Yeah, the best thing first is for the political class to indeed provide the kind of political support to the entire counter-terrorism insurgency. That is the first step, and the only way to do so is to implement the national security strategy, which is currently just undergoing review. It is actually a 5-year document, which actually just expired, and it is actually undergoing review. Implementing that document will provide 50% solution to what we currently have. And I think it is very important to recognize that fact. The second thing is that we must not see our counterterrorism effort that we can only win through the tanks, or we can only win through the guns. We can win through the mines, and the best way to win through the mine is to consistently find some level of strategic communication, which is the third pillar of the preventing and countering violent extremism pillar. Strategic communication in itself is a weapon that the state can actually use to engage. But thirdly, which is the most fundamental, is to find some kind of equality and justice system. Look, the only reason why these guys have taken weapons against the state is because they had a deep feeling of resentment and injustice. If you deal with the issue of injustice and you find a way to remediate for it, and you standardize, opportunities are there that you will gradually win people over, and those people become the ambassador. But when you use injustice to continue to fight injustice, I tell you, what we are simply simply doing is that we're expanding the consistency of the current situation that we have, and that in itself is not too good for the society.
Okay.
So these people must also know that they are also participants in this whole process. It is not only a state approach, but it is also an issue of every citizens getting involved in their value chain.
So I'm actually glad that you are saying that people should also participate in protecting themselves. You talked about strategy a while ago. So should we also learn kung fu or karate now, probably in self-defense? Because it's quite confusing if you're able to overpower and kill your attacker, then a judge will sentence you to death, saying that you should have run away instead.
The law. If you hold a knife and I hold a knife, we can talk about rules. But if you come with a bare hand and I come with bare hand, then we can talk about reason. You cannot use kung fu or karate against the man who is holding the gun. When the man holds a gun and you are not holding anything, what the man is holding is not a weapon, but the person is holding your life. So I think the idea of learning combat is actually not arising at the moment because in itself it is a poor strategy in this particular value chain. Yes, people can learn skill, that is fine. As part of continuous effort, but I tell you, even in counter-terrorism, one of the first rules that you learn is that you must obey the man who is wielding the gun, because what that man is carrying is not a weapon. What that man is holding is the truth, and that truth is very decisive, and it can use it to end your life just within the split of a second. So what would Kung Fu learning also participate or help to deal with a man who is holding a gun? I think there is no correlation in it. Most importantly is for us to stop the circulation of all of those guns, and then of course people can talk about reasoning when we have both people fighting with only hands.
All right, thank you so much, Salaudeen Hashimu, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news. We hope we get it right in this country sometime, maybe soonest. It was nice talking to you.